I used to believe love could silence any insult, that if your heart was loud enough, no one else's opinion could drown it out. But that night at an Italian restaurant with white tablecloths and crystal glasses, I learned something that would change my life. Sometimes love isn't quiet, it's complicit. My name is Barbara Mack. I'm 29, and this story begins 6 months before my relationship with Matthew ended, though I didn't know it then. The restaurant smelled of basil and wine. It was our third anniversary, and I'd spent 2 weeks of overtime just to book this place. Matthew sat across from me, looking like he'd stepped out of a corporate catalog, neat pressed and effortlessly confident. I loved that about him. Or maybe I just loved the way his presence made the world take me more seriously. We were laughing over our shared appetizer when a shadow fell across the table. Matthew, a deep, booming voice called out. Matthew's smile faltered for a split second before he stood up. "Dad, you made it." David Matthews' father was the kind of man who filled a room without needing to raise his voice. Silver hair, immaculate suit, and that unnerving calm of someone used to watching people scramble to impress him. He leaned in to kiss my cheek. His cologne smelled expensive and faintly metallic. "Barbara," he said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes, "you look lovely. I see you've done well for yourself, at least in presentation." I laughed politely, though something cold settled in my stomach. Matthew didn't say a word. He just gestured for the waiter to add another chair. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as small talk. David asked about my work project management for a mid-sized tech firm. "Oh, interesting," he said, swirling his Pinot. "And what's the next step from there? You don't plan to stay in a position like that forever, do you?" I smiled tightly. "I'm actually up for promotion soon. It's a big opportunity." He raised an eyebrow. Promotion. To what senior project manager? The way he said senior sounded like settling. Matthew kept his eyes on his plate. Then David turned to his son. "You remember Charlotte Hayes, don't you? The investment partner's daughter. She just opened that design firm downtown, already pulling in 7 figures. Bright girl." I felt the words like paper cuts, small, sharp, designed to sting later. I waited for Matthew to say something, anything. He didn't. Instead, he reached for his wine. "She's talented," he murmured. The silence that followed was suffocating. The waiter came by, asked if we wanted dessert. I shook my head. On the ride home, I kept replaying the dinner in my head. David's smirk. Matthew's silence. The city lights blurred through the window like gold smudges. "Finally," I said softly, "you could have said something." Matthew sighed, tapping the steering wheel. "He's just old-fashioned. You know how he is." "Old-fashioned," I repeated. "He basically said my job isn't good enough in front of you." He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're overreacting, Elle." He meant well. That was the first time he called me Elle with that tone, not affectionate but dismissive, like I was being childish. I turned to the window, hiding the heat rising behind my eyes. I wanted to shout, to demand that he see what his silence had done, but instead I just whispered, "I thought you were proud of me." He said nothing. The rest of the drive was quiet except for the soft hum of tires on asphalt, a sound that felt suddenly unbearable. That night I couldn't sleep. Matthew was snoring beside me, peaceful, untouched by the tension he'd let bloom between us. I stared at the ceiling, tracing invisible cracks with my eyes. In that silence, I remembered David's words. Some people build, others marry smart. At the time, I thought he was just talking about ambition. Now I realize he was setting the stage not for Matthew's success, but for my replacement. Because love, when measured by wealth, becomes a transaction. And that dinner, that was my receipt. The next morning, Matthew kissed me goodbye as if nothing had happened. "Dinner with Dad next week," he said, casually grabbing his keys. I smiled mechanically. "Sure." But as the door shut, I felt a strange clarity settle over me. Not anger, not heartbreak, just a faint tremor of recognition. That was the first crack, the kind you can't see until the light hits it just right. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's a kind of silence that feels like a countdown. You can sense something ending long before it's spoken. That's what those last weeks with Matthew felt like. A slow erasure. The laughter got shorter, the eye contact rarer, the warmth quieter. I kept telling myself it was stress or work, or maybe the weather. But the truth was simpler. He was already halfway out the door. I just hadn't caught him moving yet. It was a Tuesday night, one of those days that starts ordinary and ends in ruins. I came home early, wanting to surprise him. I cooked spaghetti, his favorite, with that overpriced sauce he liked. Our tiny apartment smelled of garlic and wine. I even opened a bottle of red, letting it breathe on the counter like a peace offering. By 7, he still wasn't home. By 8, my phone buzzed. Matthew at Dad's. Won't be long. That text hit differently now. At Dad's had started to mean somewhere I don't belong. I ate alone one forkful at a time, pretending it was fine. I told myself, you're being silly. He loves you. But love doesn't feel like waiting for someone who's already left you emotionally. He came in close to 10. The door clicked open, slow, careful, like he didn't want to wake a stranger. His face was pale, his tie slightly loose. I could tell he'd been somewhere expensive. His cologne clung too perfectly to be casual. Hey, I said softly. He looked at me like he'd forgotten I lived there. Hey, we need to talk. The way he said it made my stomach twist. Every woman knows that tone, the one that sounds like a doctor about to deliver bad news. I turned off the stove even though the food was already cold. Okay, I said, sitting on the couch. Talk. He didn't sit down. He paced, rubbing his forehead like this conversation was an inconvenience. Barbara, I love you, he began. The word love came out thin, weightless. But love isn't always enough, is it? My chest went cold. What's that supposed to mean? He exhaled. Dad and I were talking. Of course they were. They always were. He made me see things clearly. About our future. Your potential. He said it gently, but it still sliced deep. My potential, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. Matthew, what are you talking about? I'm up for promotion. You know that. He gave that half smile again, the one that felt like pity wearing politeness. Right. Promotion. And then what? Another few years to senior level. A mortgage. 2 weeks vacation a year. You really see that as living? I blinked. That's called building a life, Matthew. He stopped pacing, his expression hardened. I don't want to build, Barbara. I want to arrive. The words landed like a slap. For a moment, I just stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. He went on, voice soft, but cruel in its certainty. You're wonderful, really, but I can't keep pretending we're on the same path. I need someone who's already there, someone who fits. I felt the tears pressing behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Fits what your father's vision board. He flinched just slightly. You're being unfair. No, I said quietly. I'm finally being realistic. He looked at me like I'd disappointed him by not making this easier. I'll stay at Dad's for a few days, he said, already walking toward the bedroom. We'll figure out logistics later. I nodded numbly. Sure. He froze in the doorway, maybe expecting me to cry or beg the dramatic scene that would soothe his guilt. But I didn't. I just stood there, hands still on the edge of the table, staring at the 2 untouched plates of spaghetti. When the door closed, the sound didn't echo. It thudded softly like the world sealing shut. That night I sat on the floor beside the cold food knees pulled to my chest. I didn't cry. Not then. I just kept thinking about all the ways he'd rehearsed that speech, the pauses, the careful phrasing, the absence of real feeling. Love wasn't ending. It had been negotiated out of existence. I remember whispering into the empty room, was I ever enough for you, or was I just an investment you didn't believe in? The silence answered for him. I left the lights on until morning. Not because I was scared of the dark, but because I needed to see the place one last time, the home we built from shared dreams now reduced to furniture and dust. That was the night love turned into a transaction, and I realized I'd been the unpaid balance all along. Grief doesn't always look like crying. Sometimes it looks like bubble-wrap cardboard boxes and a woman taping up her past while the person she built her life around showers in the next room. For 48 hours after that conversation, Matthew and I became strangers occupying the same space. He avoided me. I avoided breaking. Every sound the coffee maker dripping the creak of the floorboards felt like it was reminding me that I used to belong here. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was methodical, detached, like an archaeologist cataloging the ruins of something once beautiful. I started with the photos. 3 years' worth of memories, holidays, weekend trips, lazy mornings. I spread them on the living room floor and stared. Every smile looked different now. Every hug rehearsed. I took only the ones that were mine alone. My graduation, my mom's birthday, a solo trip before I met him. The rest are US. I stacked neatly in a shoebox and left it on the counter. I didn't tear them up. That would have meant I still cared. The kitchen came next. The wine glasses his father gave us for Christmas, I left those. The mug he bought me that said, "Boss lady," I took that. Petty maybe. But sometimes survival needs souvenirs. When I called Mara, my best friend, she didn't say I told you so. She just asked, "Do you want me to come over?" "No," I said quietly, sealing another box. "I need to do this myself." She paused, then promised me something. "What?" "When you walk out that door, don't take any ghosts with you." I laughed, but it came out brittle. I'll try. Matthew appeared briefly while I was packing clothes. He leaned against the doorframe tie, loosened, pretending to check his phone. You don't have to rush, he said. We can figure out. I'm not rushing, I interrupted, folding the last of my sweaters. I'm finishing. He blinked, surprised by my tone. I think he expected tears, or pleading. Instead, he found a woman who had finally stopped waiting for him to change. His jaw tightened. Barbara, come on, don't be dramatic. I zipped my suitcase. You left me 3 days ago, Matthew. I'm just catching up. He didn't reply. He just turned and walked out. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hall light and confident, like someone certain they'd never trip. That night, I slept on the couch. The apartment was too quiet. Even the refrigerator hum felt intrusive. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if peace always came with this kind of ache. By morning, my numbness had hardened into clarity. I made coffee, poured 2 cups out of habit, then poured one down the sink. When the buzzer rang, I assumed it was Mara. But when I opened the door, David stood there. Matthew's father, perfectly pressed, suit-cold politeness radiating off him. Barbara, he greeted smoothly. Matthew told me you're moving out. It's for the best, really. You'll find someone more suited to your lifestyle. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, letting the words hang between us. He waited, expecting a reaction, embarrassment, maybe an apology. He got neither. Finally, I smiled small tight. You're right, I will. For the first time, I saw confusion flicker across his face. He wasn't used to women agreeing with his verdict so calmly. He cleared his throat, stepping aside. Take care, then. Oh, I plan to, I said, locking the door behind me. Outside, the morning sun was sharp and blinding. The cab driver helped load my suitcases into the trunk, and as I slid into the back seat, I looked up at the apartment windows one last time. 3 years of my life. Birthdays, fights, apologies, dreams, all compressed into those walls. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, but also something lighter beneath it. Relief. I whispered almost to myself, goodbye. As the car pulled away, I didn't cry. I just watched the building shrink in the rearview mirror until it was gone. Maybe I hadn't escaped heartbreak, just rewritten it. Because heartbreak, when stripped of illusion, is just truth finally saying, now it's my turn to speak. By the time the city skyline came into view, I knew what that apartment had really been. Not a home. A museum filled with relics of who I'd been trying to be, for someone who never really saw me. And I was done curating it. The first night in my new apartment, I didn't unpack. I just sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes, the air thick with dust and unfamiliar quiet. The walls were bare, the light harsh. But for the first time in months, I could breathe without waiting for someone else's approval to fill the silence. I slept on a borrowed mattress wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and freedom. It wasn't peace yet, but it was a start. The mornings came heavy at first. No text from Matthew, no one asking if I'd eaten, no soft voice telling me I worked too hard. Just the hum of the fridge, the tapping of my own spoon in my own cup. The kind of loneliness that felt clean like an empty plate after the storm. I went to work because not going would have meant thinking, and thinking was dangerous territory. At the office, everyone pretended not to notice my hollow smile. Rough week, my boss asked once. Just getting started, I replied. He nodded approvingly, not realizing I meant it in more ways than one. The days blurred. Emails, deadlines, long commutes. But in the evenings, I found something strange growing beneath the numbness discipline. I stayed late. I volunteered for projects everyone else avoided. I read every leadership manual and took every online course that crossed my feed. It wasn't just distraction, it was reconstruction. I remember one night staring at a half-finished presentation at 2 a.m., whispering to myself, if he thought my potential was limited, then I'll make sure it terrifies him next time he hears my name. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Weekends used to mean brunch with Matthew's friends, all manicured nails and easy laughter. Now they meant coffee spreadsheets and the soft hum of my laptop. Mara would call, sometimes worried. Barbara, you have to rest, she'd say. Rest from what I'd answer. I'm finally awake. She stopped arguing after that. Months passed. I got my promotion senior project manager, and with it came a salary bump that felt like oxygen. But even that wasn't enough. I wanted more, not to prove anything to them, but to the version of me who used to whisper, please love me, into the dark. So I built something that was mine. A consulting business. Small, at first weekend clients, late-night proposals, half-finished ideas written on napkins. But slowly it took shape. My first client came from a referral, then another. Word spread apparently, I was good at making order out of chaos. I'd laugh sometimes thinking, if only Matthew could see how much potential limited looks like when it's free. Through the grapevine, I started hearing things. Matthew was dating someone new, Charlotte Hayes, the investment partner's daughter David had mentioned that night at dinner. Of course. They looked perfect together in photos, polished, golden, predictable. He'd finally arrived. Mara sent me a screenshot once, her text beneath it. "Do you want me to delete this for you?" I smiled. No need. It's just data. Because by then, I'd stopped comparing. Their story wasn't my heartbreak anymore. It was my lesson plan. One Sunday evening, I found myself on the balcony, city lights glittering below. I was barefoot, holding a mug of tea, feeling the quiet hum of a life that was finally mine. And I thought of something David had said that night. Some people build, others marry smart. He meant it as a warning. But he was right, I was a builder. And the foundation I was pouring now didn't need anyone else's approval. The funny thing about ruin is that it gives you new ground, the kind untouched by expectation, the kind solid enough to hold your own name. And though I didn't know it yet, everything I was building, every late night, every risk, every decision made alone, was laying the bricks for the moment I'd stop remembering him at all. Because healing isn't forgetting, it's outgrowing. And somewhere between exhaustion and quiet triumph, I realized I wasn't rebuilding what I lost. I was creating what I deserved. 2 years. That's how long it took for the silence between me and Matthew to stop echoing, long enough for the smell of his cologne to fade from memory, for his father's voice to turn from thunder to static. By then my life had shape again, not glittering, not loud, but mine. I worked from a sleek little office downtown, sunlight pooling over the stacks of client files. The consulting firm I'd started out of desperation had become something solid, something respected. I had employees now, a schedule, a name people trusted. There was a quiet joy in watching the woman I'd become. Not a phoenix rising from ashes that's too dramatic. More like a tree growing through concrete, slow, stubborn, unstoppable. The first sign of their downfall came in the form of a message from Mara one afternoon. Mara Yu sitting down me depends. Why Mara David's firm just collapsed. Insider trading scandal. Matthew's family lost everything. I stared at my phone. For a long time, I didn't move. There was no jolt of vindication, no evil grin, just quiet. Like the universe had just finished an equation I'd stopped solving years ago. I texted back, "That's unfortunate." Mara replied with 3 dots, then, "You're impossible." Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Matthew was probably sitting in a house, half-packed in panic, his father calling lawyers, his mother pretending not to cry. And for the first time, I didn't picture them as villains. Just people who'd mistaken wealth for weatherproofing. Because when storms come, they don't check your bank balance before tearing your roof off. A few weeks later, I got the first message. Unknown number. "Barbara, it's Matthew. I heard you're doing really well. I'm happy for you. Can we talk?" I stared at the text until my screen dimmed. Then I deleted it. 2 days later, another message, a voicemail this time. I didn't even have to press play to know who it was. David's voice, smooth, controlled, but now carrying something I'd never heard before need. "Barbara, dear, we've had our differences, but family is family, isn't it? You were always the grounded one. We could use someone stable right now. Let's reconnect." Stable. That word used to sting. Now it made me laugh out loud. Soft, incredulous laughter that filled the quiet apartment like music. Mara came over that weekend with takeout. When I told her about the messages, she nearly dropped her noodles. "You're joking. They actually reached out." "Multiple times," I said. "And I deleted them." She grinned. "That's my girl." But I just smiled, faintly swirling my tea. "It's strange," I said. "I thought I'd feel triumphant, but I don't. I just feel done." One morning, I opened my inbox to find an email with no subject line, from Matthew. "Barbara, I made a mistake. You were right about everything. I thought I wanted more, but I didn't realize what I already had. I've lost everything, my job, my place, my peace. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd like a chance to talk." My cursor hovered over reply for a long time, but there was nothing to say. We weren't two people reconnecting. We were two versions of time, one that had healed and one that hadn't. I clicked delete, and this time I didn't even hesitate. That night I stood on my balcony again. The air smelled like rain and new beginnings. Somewhere below, traffic moved like veins of light through the city. I thought about David's empire collapsing about Matthew's apologies. And then I thought about myself at 29 crying over cold spaghetti, begging for scraps of validation. That woman was gone, not destroyed, evolved. I raised my glass quietly as if toasting an invisible truth. To the lesson that the life you lose trying to please someone else isn't a tragedy, it's tuition. Because every heartbreak teaches you the same thing, that the most dangerous kind of love is the one that makes you forget your own worth. And I'd never forget mine again. 2 years after the messages stopped, I thought the chapter had finally closed. Matthew and his father had vanished from my world like a storm that leaves only damp silence behind. I'd moved on not just from them, but from the woman who once needed their approval to feel real. And then one crisp autumn evening, the past decided to find me again. It was a charity gala downtown, one of those glittering events where the chandeliers outshine the guests. I wasn't there for the spectacle. I was there because Ethan, my partner, had been one of the keynote sponsors. Ethan was everything Matthew never was: calm, grounded, quietly sure of himself. He didn't fill silence with noise, he filled it with peace. When he introduced me that night, "This is Barbara, my better half," his voice carried warmth, not ownership. I remember thinking how easy it was to breathe next to him. No performance, no pretending, just ease. We were standing near the stage when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Barbara." I turned and there he was, Matthew. Older, thinner, but still carrying that faint arrogance now cracked around the edges. His expensive suit didn't fit quite right anymore. His eyes had that restless flicker of someone who'd lost the map but was still pretending to lead. "Matthew," I said, steady, almost surprised by my own calm. He smiled awkwardly. "You look incredible." His gaze darted to Ethan beside me, then back. "Who's this?" "Ethan," I said simply. "A friend." It wasn't a lie. He was my friend, the kind who built instead of competed. Ethan extended a hand politely. "Nice to meet you." Matthew shook it, his expression tightening. I could feel the comparison happening in his head, his ruin against Ethan's quiet composure. When Ethan excused himself to greet someone, Matthew seized the moment. "Barbara, I've been trying to reach you for a long time." "I know," I said. He swallowed, glancing around the glittering room. Everything fell apart. My dad, the business, it's all gone. And Charlotte. He stopped, bitterness creeping in. "She left when the money did." I nodded. "That sounds hard." He looked at me, desperate now. "I made mistakes. I listened to the wrong people. You have to believe me. I don't have to believe anything," I interrupted softly. "You already showed me who you are." He flinched, the words landing heavier than I expected. "I was scared," he said. "I thought success meant security. My dad made me think love had to look like status. And now I asked." He hesitated. "Now I know I was wrong. You were what mattered. You always were." For a second, I just looked at him. The man I'd once planned a future with. The man who'd measured my worth and potential and found me lacking. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not nostalgia, not even pity. Just distance, like watching an old film of a life I'd outgrown. "There's no going back, Matthew," I said quietly. "We don't belong to each other anymore." He stepped closer. "Please, just coffee, to talk, for old time's sake." I almost smiled. There are no old times, only lessons. He blinked. "So that's it. You're just done." I nodded. "You were right about me once, you know." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "You said my potential was limited." I smiled, then small but certain. "You were right because I kept measuring it through your eyes. Once I stopped doing that, I became limitless." His mouth opened, but no words came. Ethan returned at that moment, handing me a glass of champagne. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," I said, taking his hand. Matthew stood there frozen amid the laughter and music, a ghost in the wrong story. As Ethan and I walked away, I felt the weight of something lift, not bitterness, not revenge, just release. I didn't need Matthew to see how far I'd come, but he did, and that was enough. Later that night, as we stepped outside, the city air felt cool and clean. Ethan brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You okay?" I smiled. "Better than okay." "Old flame," he asked gently. "Old lesson," I corrected. He laughed softly, intertwining his fingers with mine. "Remind me never to underestimate you." "Too late," I said with a grin. As we walked to the car, I glanced back once through the glass doors. Matthew was still inside, standing alone, the chandeliers flickering above him like judgmental stars. And for the first time, I didn't feel small when I thought of him. I felt infinite. Because sometimes closure isn't an ending. It's a mirror showing you how much you've grown since you last looked back. It's strange how endings rarely look like endings. They don't explode. They dissolve quietly, mercifully, until one day you realize the person you once ached for hasn't crossed your mind in months. That's what peace felt like for me. Not triumph, not revenge, just the steady stillness of finally being free. It's been 3 years since that night at the gala. My consulting firm has grown into something I used to only daydream about during long office shifts. We have 12 employees now, a downtown workspace filled with laughter coffee cups, and the soft chaos of people who believe in what they're building. Every Friday, I stand by the big glass window overlooking the city and think I made this. Not to prove anyone wrong, but to honor the woman who refused to stay small. I still remember her, the one who cooked spaghetti for a man who was already planning to leave the one who begged for love she'd already earned. The one who thought enough was something she had to become. I wish I could tell her that she was never lacking, only misplaced. Sometimes new clients find me through old networks. One afternoon, my assistant forwarded me an inquiry. "Hi, Barbara. I was referred by a former colleague of yours, Matthew Matthews. He said you're the best." I read it twice, then smiled. Not a cruel smile, not even a proud one. Just that quiet kind you get when life hands you perfect irony, wrapped in professionalism. I replied simply, "Thank you for reaching out. I'd be happy to discuss your project." Because growth doesn't mean burning bridges. It means you can cross them without shaking. Outside of work, life became beautifully ordinary. Ethan and I moved in together, a home with sunlight in every room and a balcony covered in wild plants I keep forgetting to water. He doesn't complete me. He compliments me. And that's what love should feel like, not rescue, but resonance. Sometimes over coffee, he'll tease me about my obsession with overworking. I tell him it's muscle memory. Once you rebuild yourself from nothing, you never forget how to keep the walls steady. He just smiles, kisses my forehead, and says, "You don't have to hold the ceiling up alone anymore." And I believe him. A few weeks ago, I got a message request on social media. The profile picture was blank. The name was familiar. Matthew. No text, just a single line, "I'm glad you're happy. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to see you when it mattered." I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because forgiveness doesn't always need to be spoken. Sometimes silence is the loudest form of peace. I archived the message, closed the app, and went back to watering my plants. If someone asked me today what I learned from all of it, I'd say this: love can break you, but self-respect, once you find it, will rebuild you stronger than any apology ever could. People like David and Matthew taught me something without meaning to. That being enough isn't about fitting someone else's standard. It's about outgrowing the need to meet it. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the woman who lost everything. I see the woman who started over brick by brick, breath by breath. And every morning when I open my office door, I whisper a small prayer of gratitude for the heartbreak that became the blueprint. Because without it, I'd still be waiting for permission to shine. Final narration. Soft cinematic tone. He taught me that love measured in wealth is a transaction. He taught me that silence can be a cage. But I taught myself something greater, that walking away isn't weakness. It's how you reclaim your name. The camera lingers on Barbara, closing her laptop, turning off the office lights, and stepping into the glow of the evening city.